good evening all. This is Claudia Manchanda, radical herbalist, and I'm going to talk about Valeriana officinalis, because summer's kind of self-seeded in my backyard, and I always find people don't talk enough about the kind of paradoxical effects of valerian and the way it kind of fires some people up. And it's just quite an interesting ancient herb that like readily self-seeds itself everywhere and just flourishes in the chaos of capitalism. So here we have quite a little baby Valeriana, and as I said, they really self-seed readily, and I'm catching this one just as the flowers are finishing, and it's known as Valerian. It's in the honeysuckle family, and I think the name Valerian comes from Valer, which means, I think, to be strong, brave, well, healthy, all those kinds of things. And it's the root that's used in medicine. I wonder if I could even take some out for you, because I've got a few that have seeded in my garden, in my backyard. And in this country we tend to use Valeriana officinalis, and if it's called officinalis, it means it was named in sort of colonial times as being designated to being culinary or medicinal or official. But there's other types. There's an Indian one called Valerian lychee. There's one called the tobacco root, which is Valerian edulis. There's Valerian stigensis, which is specific Valerian. There's also Mexican Valerian, which is Mexican, which is Valeriana mexicana. There's also, I think, one from the Pyrenees called Valerian Pyrenea or something like that. And it's a very popular, even though it's ancient, it's a very popular herbal remedy for anxiety, insomnia, hypertension. It can be used for that as well because it's so relaxing, for spasmodic coughs, for cramps, even for urinary spasm. But people think of these herbs as just sort of anti-stress herbs and don't look at the energetics of the medicine. And it's a big trend in kind of herbal medicines to say herbs are, you know, anxiolytic or for insomnia or for whatever the condition is. But herbs don't work like that. They have characters like humans, and they have ways of being. And this herb can be quite invigorating for people who are quite fiery, and it's not really good for people who are very, very kind of like wired and adrenally burnt out, saying adrenal burnout. But what it means is people who are kind of, you know, manically burnt out and hyper. I'm one of those people, actually. It's like a herb that I have to be careful with the dose. It works for me at a small dose, but at a high dose I could get quite hyper. It's a dose-dependent plant, and it's the root that is used, and the root that is fresh is different to the dried root, and the fresh root smells really lovely, and the dried root can have quite a stinky smell because of a chemical in it called valproic acid, which is a type of butyric acid, and butyric acid is named after rancid butter. So It can have a bit of a rancid smell when it's dried out, but I quite like the smell of it. So this herb energetically is acrid, and acrid is a name that refers to kind of metallic-y or spicy or pungent and warming taste, and it often disperses energy, can bring chi into the lungs. It's often warming. This plant is a nervine, and there are many different types of nervines, and they're plants that affect the nerves, and this is a herb that particularly acts on the nerves. It's called a hypnotic herb, which can make you, can help you to sleep, and it removes obstacles to sleep. Some people call it an antidepressant, but it's a herb I might not give to some people with depression, because it relaxes smooth muscles. It's antispasmodic to blood vessels, so it's good for lowering blood pressure. It can help spasms in the digestive tract. It can relieve gas and bloating because of its warming nature. And because it can shift you from a sympathetic nervous system state, which is flight or fight, it can move you to relaxation, digestion. It can move you to that parasympathetic state if you're quite wired, especially with low and medium doses. In astrology, I've seen it associated with Venus because of its calming effects, but it's also been associated with Mercury, the messenger, which is ruled under Gemini and Virgo, and Mercury's very associated with the mental state, with shifting, fast energy, sometimes supporting clarity of mind, helping making essential decisions, and making sense of situations. One of the reasons that the fresh herb is used is because the essential oils can get lost in drying. One way of using valerian is to bash up the fresh root, put it in a sock and run it into the bath. So you can lie in a bath of fresh valerian. So we're in the beginning of July now, and it's a really nice time to do that. Because the herb is actually quite drying out the root makes its energetic even drier. So you don't want to give it to people who are very, very dry in their constitution necessarily. The dry root, by the way, has been used for a talisman for protection, and also it's been put in dream mixes and under pillows, in pouches. So in Chinese medicine, valerian is considered to be quite yang, which is warm and drying, expansive. And in some of my Chinese medicine books, it's been described to be used with tidal fevers, with empty heat, or the Shaoyin phase, or the Lessian phase of infections related to the lung and the spleen, like in situations of chronic watery diarrhea, or when there's no thirst, when someone has a pale white tongue. In Chinese medicine, its tropism or its affinities are with the heart, the arterial circulation, the brain and the spinal nerves, the uterus, where it calms stagnation, uterine spasms, with the kidneys when there's yin deficiency, which could be characterized by anxiety, irritability. It also has affinity for the bladder and the pancreas. In Ayurvedic medicine, it's associated with the root and the sacral chakra and the throat chakra, and the colours red, orange and blue. It's considered a herb that's got moderate chronic toxicity, which doesn't mean that it's actually poisonous as such, but it's not something you'd want to use all the time, and it's something you use in severe and acute states. In European medicine and magic, it's been used for banishing things that are not wanted, for calming, for consecration, for dream mixes that help with optimism, for self-acceptance, for banishing guilt. It's been used for divination, which links to, it's linked to the Mercury planet. Yeah, it's also been used for connection to other realms and having clarity within that, if that makes sense. Some of the names for valerian include oil or heel, herbosha, which refers to the fact that cats can love valerian root, and they can has a catnip-like effect from, it's got chemicals in it that are a bit like nepatolactones that are in catnip. It's called Amantia, Sambal ul Haftar, Marcinella. Fu is an ancient name. Boulder bracken, Suk Anda, Sabal or Tib. And it's actually one of the most popular plants in Europe. One of the old names is Genicularis. In this country, Britain, UK, it was used for air raid shock in World War II. It was used for convulsions in young children, for tension headaches and smokers' coughs, for insomnia and bronchial spasm. The decoction has been used as an antiseptic lotion for slow healing wounds because, as I said, it's got that blood moving quality that can bring the blood to stagnant areas. But if you actually have a wound that's not healing, it's always good to check out it's not a skin cancer or an infection that needs treating with something stronger. The medical herbalist Thomas Bartram, who passed away a while ago, said that it mixes well with wild lettuce, Jamaican dogwood, hops, skullcap, passion flower, depending on what you want it for. He said it's good with lime flowers for hypertension and epilepsy. Some of the constituents in valerian are very unstable and change upon processing, and this is called biotransformation, and that's why many herbalists prefer the fresh preparations. Valerian wine has been a traditional drink, and it's been used to, it can be used to clean wounds and support healing. Valerian's also been mashed up into poultices to draw out splinters and infection. It contains a flavonone called hesperidin that is contained also in the fruit of citrus. It also contains apigenin that's in parsley, celery and chamomile, and it contains the alkaloids actinidine, which is a monoterpene that's, as I said before, got this catnip-like effect. It's chemically similar to an beta-lactone and catnip. And actinidine is a chemical that stick insects secrete when threatened, which is quite interesting. The other alkaloids include chatinine, chyanthrin, valerianine, and valerian. The chemical isovaleriamide, which is created by extraction at a low dose, is a mild anxiolytic, but at a high dose is sedative. So, as I said, it's a dose-dependent plant. And isovaleriamide is a GABA receptor agonist. So it binds with GABA receptors. And GABA stands for GABA-aminobutyric acid, but it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. It plays a role in B-cell conversion in the pancreas, the beta cells, and it plays a role in peripheral tissues and organs, and has a role in glucose metabolism. Another key chemical in valerian is the iridoid chemicals, like the valproates, like isovaltrate and valtrate. It's also, as I said, a stinky plant that contains volatile oils like sesquiterpenes, which I said were affected by processing and diminished on drying. It has valerianic acid, which again is a selective GABA-A modulator, lowers the transcription of nuclear factor kappa B, and is a partial agonist of 5-HT. The valproic acid is anticonvulsant. It reduces mania and bipolar. That would be dose dependent, and also you'd have to consider the constitution of the person, and it's also anti-migraine. The side effect of valproic acid is nausea, vomiting, dry mouth, and it's used in psychiatric medicine as an isolate that actually has a negative effect on liver function, but not in the whole plants at herbal medicine doses. It's believed that in the tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, the animals followed the Pied Piper because he had, valerian root stuffed in his pockets. I remember listening to a podcast once of Howie Brownstein and Steve Yeager, and they were talking about how, I think, pumas and jaguars dig up valerian and roll in it like cats do with catnip. And I love that imagery. And because they dig it up, it stimulates more growth of the plant. It's a plant that kind of loves to grow, loves agitation. It, as on earth in the body, and it loves agitated states in the human body, and it likes agitated states on the earth. Culpeper described valerian mixed with aniseed, licorice and raisins and boiled up, which sounds absolutely divine, and that was used for coughs and to expectorate phlegm. Very warming. He said that it had a special virtue against the plague. It healed inward stores and outward stores and wounds, like the drawing out of splinters from flesh. Most of the clinical studies on valerian are on sleep, quite a lot on sleep. They mostly say that valerian improves the quality of sleep, without the kind of dopey side effects of many of the anxiolytic drugs and sleeping pills. They found that it affected the frontal cortex in the region to do with alpha coherence. It decreased theta coherence. They found that high doses were used for sedating, but it could cause excitation and visual disturbance and headaches. And this is where energetics is so important, where Valerian can clash with constitution. For low dose, it's used for heart qi yang deficiency, and for blood and spleen deficiency. And the medium dose is used for stimulating and relaxing. There were some studies done on valerian that was mixed with hops, and there were studies that were done on valerian that were mixed with lemon balm, and both were very efficacious on anxiety and falling asleep and quality of sleep. So let's revise valerian: relaxing, warming, drying, spasm, sleep, spasmodic cough, period pains, high blood pressure. It can have paradoxical effects in different people. It can make people like Sagittarians, like me, who are fiery, more aggy. But it can work as well depending on the dose. It's used best as a fresh plant, either tincture, or like I said, you could just bash it up and actually just suck the root, or put it in, bash it up in a sock and put it in your bath.